Hello, welcome again. My name is Emmanuel Odrojuma and I'll be your trainer for this entire series. This series will be focused on CSS, but since CSS is applied to HTML, basic requirement is that you know what HTML does and how to use HTML tags to bring the content of your web page. So if you don't know how to use HTML, just I have a playlist of HTML which is very beginner friendly. Watch it and come back to continue with this series. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe to it. Turn on the notification button to get alerted when a new video is posted. If you like the video at the end, hit the like button. Before I go to the actual code, let's talk about what CSS really does for us. So on this page, you see there is a text here, button there. There is an input here, there is an icon here, an input, an icon, a button. All these elements were generated by the help of HTML. So we used HTML to get these elements onto our page, and we use CSS to style them. So CSS is used for styling, and then the HTML is used for bringing the content of the page. So let me take CSS out so that we now see the power of CSS. So I take CSS out, save it, and this is just HTML doing its thing. So this is just HTML. CSS did the styling, the colors, the positioning, and everything. So if I bring CSS back, we get a nice looking web page. So this is what CSS does for us. It's used for styling our web page. HTML just brings the content. So before you can style, you need the content. That's why I was saying HTML is the basic requirement for this particular course. So if you have not if you have no idea about HTML, if you have no knowledge of HTML, I have a series for that. Go back and watch, come back and continue with this series. I'd like to start this project by creating a new project to handle the lessons for CSS. So I'll come to my projects, right click, select new folder, name it CSS lessons. So within my folder, I'll create another folder called images to keep all the images that I'll be using for this tutorial. So I'm done. If you are confused with this, please head to my HTML playlist. You get a fair idea of what I'm doing. Okay, so I open my project within VS Code. Let me bring up VS Code. Let me close this particular project. Okay, so I open my new project, have it on desktop. Inside my projects folder, CSS lessons, select folder. Okay, so I have my folder opened within Visual Studio Code. What I'll do next is to create my first file for my first HTML file for my web page. What I mostly do is to first click on the folder that will host my HTML file. So I'll click on CSS lessons and click on it back again to confirm that when I create the file, it will be actually stored in that particular folder. So I click on this and name it index.html. Bring up the boilerplate. So I'll add only 2 elements and each one element with welcome to CSS lessons. Add a paragraph tag with a dummy text. Save it. Let's look at how it is now. So I have my basic HTML page with 2 elements and each one element and a paragraph element. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to apply CSS to our HTML document. So the first way we are going to look at is the internal CSS. Now, to apply internal CSS, what we do is to head to the head tag, move to the head tag, and inside the head tag we add another tag called the style tag. So because you are going to have different things within the style tag, to format it, well, I'll bring the closing tag downwards by pressing enter. So within the style tag, that is where we are going to host our CSS code. So I'm going to go through a basic CSS declaration to demonstrate how the styles apply to the web page. So we have 2 elements. The first thing we need to decide on is which element we wish to apply that style. So if you want to apply it to the H1, it means we are going to select each one. We have to select it within our style tag. So we need a selector to be able to locate what we want to style. Since we have different things on our page, we choose the H1 tag. So we are going to style the heading. So I choose H1, so that is the selector. So H1 is the selector now. We bring a curly bracket, hit on enter to bring the closing downwards. So now we have our element selected. What we need is what property or what do we want to do to that particular element. We want to change the color of that particular element to red. So it means the property that we want to apply on that element is a color property. So we now need the value of the color we want to apply to that particular element. So I bring a colon and then I bring red and end it with a semicolon. So this is a simple CSS declaration to change the color of a particular element. So you need a selector. Since we have different items on the page, even if the only item on the page was H1, we still need to select it before we give the property and then the value. So if I save it now, see that the heading changes to red. So this is an internal style that we have just applied to our HTML document. The second method I'll talk about is by using the external CSS file. So instead of writing the CSS declarations within the HTML file, we create a separate file to host everything CSS and link it to the HTML document. So I'll come to this side to create my file, and what most designers do is to create a separate folder called CSS, so that if we have different web pages, they will create styles for those different web pages and link them to their separate HTML documents. So to create that folder, I want that folder within the CSS lessons folder. So I'll click on CSS lessons, click on it back again to make sure that the folder I create will be created within that particular folder. So instead of using this one, I'll use this. So I name it CSS. So within the CSS folder, I create my CSS file. So I'll click on it back again, and select new file. Now I can name it style .css. The extension is very important. When we're naming the HTML page, we added the extension .html. When we are creating an external file for CSS, we add the file extension .css and press enter. So I have my styles.css file here. I have my index.html file here. So I can be toggling within. So I can be toggling among those pages to change whatever that I want to change. So I want to work within the CSS file. So just like we did for the internal CSS, I'm going to make another CSS declaration within that external file. I'm going to use the same h1, bring a curly bracket, going to still change the color to blue and end it with a semicolon. So I've made another declaration for the same element. I save it. Now you see that nothing happens on our page because we have not linked the styles.css file to the index.html file. So I'll come back to the HTML file, and still within the head, I can now add another tag. So to link my CSS file to my HTML, I use the link tag. Press enter, and you see that the cursor is now blinking within the href. So we are now going to tell the HTML document where to locate that particular CSS file. And if you look at my file tree very well, you see that within the CSS lessons, that CSS file is also inside a folder called CSS. So what I'll do is to first tell it that my file is within a folder called CSS. So I type CSS, and VS Code suggests to me that, oh, okay, there is a folder called CSS. So I can select it here, and after selecting it, it gives me the file within it so that I can also select it from here without typing it. So I can select it, and now when I save it, nothing happens. I'll use this opportunity to explain something about external and internal CSS, or CSS in general. CSS is a cascading style sheet. So the order that it is applied to this particular document is very important. So when you look at this HTML file, the style sheet was applied to the document, and afterwards this internal CSS was also applied to it. So this particular one will override the first one. So even though there is a style being applied within this particular file, this one is going to override that particular style. So if I cut this one and bring it down here, save it again, you see that the color changes to blue. It means that it first applied this and later applied this one. So this one will override the first one. So you have to bear in mind that when you use both ways of styling your HTML, the one you use at the latter part will always override the first one. So that is one thing that we have to put in memory. So if I bring it back to the top and save it, it changes to red. Okay, I'm going to add another declaration to our external file so that we know that both the external sheet and then the internal styles are all applying to our page. So I'll come to my styles, I'll add another declaration. This time around I want to change the font size. And then the value I want to change it to, let's make it 64px. We'll talk about all these later on. And this is what we get after saving it. You see that the font size inside this particular styles.css file is being applied to the h1 element. Since the internal style didn't have any font size property being applied, there was nothing to override the font size within this particular styles.css. So if there was to be another declaration for font size within the style, the internal style, then that particular one is going to override the one we have specified within this particular external file. So both CSS ways are being applied to our document. Just that if we do anything that has been already done here, this particular one is going to override the one in that particular file because of the order that we have placed it. The last way of applying CSS is by using inline CSS. So we have talked about using internal CSS, we have talked about using an external file. This time around we are going to talk about an inline CSS. For inline, we are going to apply it to the particular tag or particular element itself. So if we wanted to change the h1 element, we come to the h1 tag, the starting h1 tag, and add an attribute called style. So for the inline, it is done with an attribute called style to the tag itself. So I add style, And then what property do I want to apply? I want to apply a color, and then the value that I want to apply is let me use green. Now I save it and it turns to green. Okay, so for inline, it doesn't matter the order of arrangement of the tags. Inline always takes precedence. So if this one comes first or that one comes first, whatever that comes first, it doesn't matter. So if there is any inline style, it is going to take precedence over all other ways of performing or adding or implementing CSS. So you see that in our style sheet, in our external style sheet, a color was applied. In our internal style, there was another color, and then within our tag itself, there was another color, but the color it chose was the one from the internal, the one inline. So as a developer, best practice is to use the external style sheets. Try as much as possible to avoid the inline styles. Best practice, use the external style sheets. So within this course, we'll be concentrating on using the external style sheets instead of the other two.